Now, Daoism goes back a long time. I mean, Lao Tzu wrote the Dao De Jing, give or take, somewhere between 2,000 and 2,500 years ago. There are all sorts of scholarly debates on that subject. But the fact of the matter is that within the actual inner tradition of Daoism, the spiritual tradition of Daoism, okay, not the political tradition of Daoism, not the social psychology aspect of Daoism, but the actual spiritual tradition of Daoism, which transcends anything your mind can think of, then they kept this going on, and they had principles that made it work. Now, the story of the Dao De Jing, try and understand something. If you can understand what the Bible is, okay? If you can understand what the Old Testament, the Torah, is, if you can understand what was the basis of the Zoroastrian scriptures, if you can understand that various religions, they have a book that explains their principles. And the objective of those books is that a person should be able to actually do them in their daily life. Not think about them, not believe in them. Like right now, hell, I believe I'm a multi-billionaire and I have enough money to buy Dubai. I'm sitting in this little place, which would probably get you about 1 square inch of land in Dubai. So I can believe in anything. You can believe in leprechauns. As a matter of fact, they do in Scandinavia, and they really do in Iceland. Their whole society was based upon the fairies. Now, are there fairies? I don't know. And then once you have that idea, then you start, the human brain gets very creative and it starts making big stories. Okay? The Greek gods. Were they the Greek gods? I don't know. But the Greeks believed that governed everything that occurred on this earth. Was that true? I don't know about that. Today we would say, oh, really? Oh, you mean this god has brought the rain, but they believed, and they have based their whole society on it. People would sacrifice their lives, make decisions in their lives based upon what they believed. And very often those beliefs had no objective, if you want to use that word, factual basis. And as time went on, a few thousand years went on, we found that, thunder and lightning actually came from the principles of meteorology, or this came from the principles of oceanography, or this came from what science came into. But again, science doesn't actually give people a solid way about how to live your life so that the inner turmoils inside you don't cause you great trouble. Well, they have some of the things. They can get some of the more egregious external things can be figured out by, well, the brain does this, and now the next thing you know, you're a schizophrenic, or you start seeing and hearing things all the time. In the ancient world, they would just say, well, that was this god, or one of this god's assistants was putting that in your head. One was belief, one now is we have a belief about things that we can prove. The only trouble is that many of the proofs are very, very myopic. They fit a particular situation at a particular time, and there is no way of knowing about whether or not they go on for long periods of time, and about how they change and morph. Well, the ancient spiritual traditions of the world had simple answers to how all that happened. They looked at the law of karma, which has yet to be disproven. They looked at the way that human interactions happen, and then what's behind it. So now that we're to the Dao De Jing. For those of you who want to know how I learned about this, it's in the book. You can read it. Okay, there's no need to bore you with my life history, because my life history or anybody else's life history is what happened to a specific person over a specific period of time under specific circumstances. The only thing is, I was a Taoist priest. I studied what was the inner workings of Taoism for 7 years, full time. And then later on, I studied with someone who in Daoism would have been the equivalent of a Dalai Lama or a Jesus Christ. So at least I have a fair idea of what's in the DaodeJing. And this is not something most people are not aware of. The DaodeJing has, 80 some odd chapters. If you take the Bible is broken up, since that's something almost everybody knows something about who's in this room anyway. You have the big title, and then you have this chapter and that chapter and that chapter and that chapter. And a minister or a priest will get up and he will say, oh, Ecclesiastes chapter, blah, 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 where it's broken up into sections that each are illustrating an important point. Now, they have a lot of them. I mean, you pick up a Bible sometime and you'll see those numbers. Then when people say, Mark 17 subsection. Well, it was the same thing in Daoism, except that it came from a different type of a tradition. Where in the West, what we like today, and I do say today, is that we want things spelled out clearly with a beginning, a middle, and an end that's unambiguous. Okay, that's reductionist thinking. There's this whole bloody world around us. And so the first step of reductionism, well, there are atoms. Oh, well, put atoms together and you get something. Oh, but that's not true. Then you get down to the quantum field and you've got this thing and that thing and that thing and this quark and that quark and this whatever. And each one is what is part of the building block of the whole. Well, in Daoism, they consider that everything is really and truly a manifestation of the Tao. Now, just to kind of get it, the Tao is not God. There is no God in Daoism. The other great Eastern religion, Buddhism, there is no God in Buddhism. But they are describing what causes the human mind to function. So for individual happiness or the ability to get the wisdom of how to deal with the rest of these people walking around the earth, you have to have something that's concrete. So there are chapters. So I'm not going to make any attempt, at least today, to try and go through, because every single subsection of Dao De Jing implies certain principles. And in the oral tradition, which you could not put in a book unless you wanted this book to be 100 million pages long, which some people might like and maybe somebody would read, I'm not sure who. But each chapter then goes into what is a specific aspect to the human condition. Now, everything in the Dao De Jing is going for a few things. At its most simple level, on which it's been most appreciated throughout history, is a book of philosophy about how to live a life. Just like in ancient Greek philosophy, there were certain ideas that Plato and Socrates and all sorts of other people advocated, and those things actually became the basis of Western culture. Because the Greeks gave it to the Romans, and between the Greeks and the Romans, we now have the basis of Western civilization. Western thought. And everybody's affected by it, even if you don't realize it and you've never actually studied the old books. The fact of the matter is that anything you really believe in, even you take the church, let's say the Catholic Church, a huge amount of the Catholic Church is based upon the thinking of those ancient Greeks. Not using the same language, not using the same examples, but taking about, well, what is this thing and what's it supposed to do? Well, Daoism has that also, and so there's many chapters in the book, and so we'll at least kind of stay with the first chapter first. Remember, there's another 83 after it. Okay? Now, if you look at this, if we actually look at the book, this book was originally twice its thickness. But then we said, wait a second, today, hell, people have trouble getting through a TikTok tweak. It's okay, so you got to make it smaller so people will actually take a look at it. And so a lot of work was done to actually what I just call shrink the book. Because on the computer, this was 1,400 pages long. And then it got shrunk down, it got to about 1,100, and then the rest of it just to be in tune with the modern age is that people don't read, is to make it at least not intimidating. But if you were to take that basis, if there was not the huge Christian churches and the huge number of people who've got ministers every Sunday and priests telling them blah, 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 the Bible would be at least 100,000 pages. If you were actually not to try, not to have things condensed. So that type of condensed writing where a few words are illustrating a large principle that would actually, if you were to write it as you would in the West, comprise 20, 30, 40, 50 pages in a book. That stuff is called being terse. To the nub of the thing, but nothing that's explaining anything beyond the nub, because it's inherent in the writing. Well, that's how ancient Chinese was written. Okay, the actual book in Chinese from which this monster is about that thick. It's tiny. But I'm writing for a Western audience, and a lot of what's in the DaodeJing is very inspirational because a person can take it on an ordinary bit about how to live their life. And it's worked that well. Now, in the 1950s, 40s, 50s, 60s, even back to the beginning of the century, the Dao De Jing, or the Taoist books, were the center of the Western idea of what Eastern spirituality was. Then, as information started flowing back from India, then the Indian spiritual ideas started getting in there. And people assumed, well, if it's spiritual and it's not Christian or something, then that must be the new improved version. Well, it wasn't. And then you started going back even further than that. And then you started finding out that those things became the basis of what was in Buddhism. Now, if you read most Buddhist texts that were from the original Abhidharma, that was like the Buddhist Bible, the words of the Buddha, and you were to read a lot of that, it would not, on the surface of it, unless it was explained to you what the hell those words were talking about, you wouldn't be able to figure it out. Well, I should say, a few rare geniuses could, maybe, but most likely not. Well, it was the same thing with the things in Daoism. All I've tried to do is to have what is in the Dao De Jing make sense in contemporary English so you could begin to get what the ideas were. Now, I've lived this, this has been the basis of my life since my 20s. But I'm not trying to say that any of you, I'm not trying to convert anyone here to Taoism. But I think that as one of the great wisdom books in the human condition, then it's a good thing to know about. And it will give you a lot of ideas which will solve many of the problems of today. Now, the time that the Dao De Jing was written, the historical era the Dao De Jing was written, was not dissimilar to today's. What is the big thing? I mean, since 1900, there's, every couple of years you got a major war somewhere. That's not even talking about the biggies, World War I and World War II. And you keep on getting into, we thought Vietnam in America, that would be the end of this bullshit. Are you kidding? You ever heard of Iraq? You ever heard of Afghanistan? And whether these things made sense or not, the thing that appears consistently throughout most of human history is that human beings love killing each other. What we call savages, it's kind of hard to say that humans aren't savages. And the purpose of all religions, the purpose of all spiritual traditions, and they're not the same, because religions say, you must do this, you should do this. And if you do this, then you're making some God somewhere very happy with you, and he'll reward you. Where a spiritual tradition is simply talking about how to arrive at the point that that is what you will do naturally. Now, all these different things that block spirituality could, in the phrase the Taoists use are blockages. Okay, they're blockages. Like, for example, you want to buy a house. And that house costs, let's just say, $250,000. Let's not go into what the expensive houses cost. But that's something that's within the reach of most people, even if they got to get 4 or 5 members of their family to all come together to do it. But that money, what if you only have 50 grand? You know what your blockage is? $450,000. Means you don't have it. And unless you come up with that through whatever means, your own cash, the bank's cash, the person who owns the house is going to say, well, I'm glad that you desperately want this house. I'm glad that you like it. I'm glad that you appreciate it. But, take a hike. Because they want $500,000. That's the price. Well, it's the same thing in spirituality. In order to become spiritually free, your internal blockages have to be gotten rid of. Now, that in the beginning is just what I call the normal human condition psychological blockages. Okay? You hate. It's a blockage. You love excessively to where you see a man or a woman or a cat or a dog, and next thing you know, you're gushing and everything, and then you're doing really crazy stuff based upon it. Read the story of Romeo and Juliet. That was a love blockage, any way you want to take it. Okay? So we have all these things, and they're blockages, and until you get through with them, you can't get past your conscious mind. Now, ancient Greek philosophy, as a matter of fact, virtually every philosophy that's been out there historically and has stood, is always telling you how to order your mind, how to think. But spiritual blockages are not about what you think. Oh, it may start that way, but where does that thinking come from? What is it that is so solid inside you that even though you would like to get rid of it, you can't? Even though you expend tremendous effort, you seem to take 2 steps forward. Before you know it, you fall back 3 steps. So these are blockages, and different traditions have ways of dealing with it. Now, in the first chapter of the Dao De Jing, they introduce what is, in some ways, the core principle that after you start going to what all its implications are, will enable you to get rid of all your blockages. And this is the idea of yin and yang. Now, yin and yang is not such a strange thing. Buddhism has yin and yang. It just calls it something else. The Hindus had it. They called it Shiva and Shakti. So they gave different names to what effectively was the same thing. Now, in many spiritual traditions, they say, if you believe this and you do what this belief is, then you'll get rid of your blockages. And human history has shown that that hasn't worked too well. Because even though you want to get rid of your desire to rip people out by their throat because they did something nasty to you, guess what? Wait a month and you're going to do it. You'll have a week or 2 or 3 where you'll feel free of it because you felt you entered some high, noble ground. Yeah, but then give it a little bit of time. The effect will wear off. It's a bit like a firecracker. It's very loud when it goes boom, but then you wait, and 2 minutes later, the air is silent. So the Taoists said that, how does it work? And on this basis, the Dao De Jing is actually, historically, by Confucian scholars who only did things through their mind, through their thinking process, they said that, well, it was 2 parts. Well, actually, within Daoism, the Dao De Jing and the way the chapters run is 3 parts. The first part is, what are you trying to do? Okay, the second part is that, what specific mechanisms have to be applied so that you can do it? And the third part is, once you've done it, what do you do now? How do you maintain this so that what you gain from the second part never leaves you? So it doesn't take a push of will to continue it. Thou shalt not kill. The actual translation is thou shalt not murder. Okay. Well, you get some criminal, or you get a military person, and they were able to do that for a short period of time, but go see them 3 years later, I bet you they're still killing people. Because softening something, mitigating it, lessening it, does not fully resolve it, because if you fully resolve something, it's gone. It doesn't come back. So this is the Dao De Jing. Now, the first third of the Dao De Jing is the first sections, and they don't have clear demarcations. They weren't written with the idea of, well, you go to here, that's section 1, that's section 2, that's section 3. 1 flows into 2, 2 flows into 3, because that's the nature of how people absorb things and stabilize them. The first section deals with how to correct the messed up thoughts in your mind and how you deal with people based on those thoughts, and how you become healthy or you become sick because of those thoughts. So that's the first one, is recognizing the environment. The second one is that what are the specific things that will enable you to clear the underbrush out, that will enable you to clear out the garbage that's inside you until it's gone. And the third part is, and then how do you exist in this world or now or any other? Because the Taoists believe, since we don't know how long, that the universe is vast. And which modern science now confirms, because we got telescopes that can see it. But before then, people didn't believe the universe was vast. They had all sorts of philosophical ideas about how big it was. But it's big, and of the trillions of planets out there, many of them support some kind of life. And so Taoists, like most of the ancient religions of the world, and as a matter of fact, if you want to get into it, even Christianity, especially if you go to the Gnostic schools, they said that in all those planets, there's a chunk of those planets that have life. Maybe it's like human life. Maybe it's silicon-based life. Maybe it's, I don't know, life based upon something in the periodic table we don't even know exists yet. But trillions of beings. And if you can't finish what you have to do here, either you can come back to this place or you can go to one of those places where the environment may be one that is more conducive to your natural internal workings. So that just kind of gets that Daoism is one of these things that thinks about reincarnation. Okay? And even to a limited extent, when Jesus Christ said to Barabbas on the cross, you will be by my side, by my Father in heaven. He's discussing reincarnation. It's only a question of whether you're talking bodily or you're talking of the spirit. But it is. But of course, on this earth, you don't want that to be a dominant force if you're a ruler. If you want a ruler, you want to bow down before the king and let all that spiritual stuff just be something to make the common people happy. Well, the Taoists didn't think that way. So the first thing is this, just taking some big principles. I can't go into everything. It's in the Dao De Jing. I mean, if we had a couple of years, we could do it. And that was presuming we're meeting a couple of hours every day, which is pretty much what I went through to learn it. I mean, I did that for more than 10 years. You have yin and yang. So take something that's simple, good and bad. That's a big one in the Western one. What's the definition of good? Whatever the gods find pleasing. What's the definition of bad? Whatever the gods find displeasing. And if you do this, you kind of cover all the gods that have been out there since human history. Not just God with a capital G, but everything going back to the cavemen. So you have an idea of what's good. And if you take the idea of what's good to be too bad, you become disconnected to reality. Okay, everything we call it, I think the phrase in America is Pollyanna. And everything, oh, you see someone shoot someone in the street. Oh, that's good because their soul will go to heaven. I don't know exactly how much the person who just got shot would agree with that, but still, that's one thing. Or you'll get giddy. Or something will come up and you'll be laughing and you'll feel a sense of joy, whether that sense of joy has anything behind it. Then you have the other side. You have what's the nasty stuff, the dark nights of the soul, or everything that has been described throughout history as demons. They're inside of you when they're working. You look at a child and you just want to kill it. You want to break its bones. You see a puppy, you want to step on it. So you have these quote-unquote negative. Now, in truth, you now come to somewhat of a philosophical thing that has to do with yin and yang. Is anything intrinsically better or worse than anything else? Because all these ideas of good and bad, kindness and, oppression, are all coming from a human perspective. How you as a human being would experience that. But the fact is that we're only a very tiny, tiny subsection of the life that's out there. And if something is going to be spiritual, it has to encompass all life, not just the particular life you're in. Now, if you just want to feel psychologically better, if you want your own sense of comfort versus discomfort to increase, then you can focus everything on human beings. But the Taoists didn't do that. Just as in other religions, God doesn't really care about you. He cares about him or her and how they feel about things. And you're just supposed to go along with it. Otherwise, the God will be unhappy. And then when you die, he'll fuck you. That's all there is to it. There's no need to put it in nice language. So you'll do things and you'll follow all the rules and all of this so that you don't get screwed at the end of the day. The Taoists held the opinion, Dao De Jing holds the opinion, that what governs what affects human beings is a bigger thing than what happens to them personally or how they personally feel about anything. And they say there are universal forces at work. And these universal forces they call the Tao. And the Tao permeates everything. You, life on this earth, life in all those trillions of planets. Now, most people who discuss the DaodeJing never actually think about, well, what about beyond this earth? Because they primarily take it as a philosophical text. And the reason for that is pretty damn simple. In ancient China, as in most other countries, they based their legal systems, their ruling systems upon what they thought their God wanted. Do what your God wants, you get rewarded. Don't do what your God wants, you don't get rewarded. But the Taoists said something else. Now, in the West, what we call God is omnipotent, omniscient. He knows all, sees all, can do all. So if the God wants to say, okay, now, well, 1 million people appear in that corner of the globe, they do. And if you believe in that, then you believe making that God happy is important. If you make the God happy, he'll make you happy. But the Taoists said that the workings of the unconscious mind and what is beyond the unconscious mind, they're what make people either satisfied with life or dissatisfied with life. And it makes whether they act, I don't know, I guess I would call it reasonably or not reasonably. I mean, I think everybody here could agree that humans are intrinsically savage. Whether there will be a world in 100 years from now is a very debatable subject because if you go throughout human history, blocks of human beings are always trying to destroy the other human beings. And the only reason why they've never succeeded, they've never had the weapons to do it. Well, that era is over because they do have the weapons to do it now. You know, it started with atomic weapons, but now, I don't know, we're coming into other stuff. And who knows what the future will bring. So, how do you get people past the internal bullshit they have inside themselves? And I use the word bullshit deliberately. so that they can let it go, so that they can stop acting like savages, or, let's put it this way, lose the interest in acting like savages. Well, and they saw this thing of yin and yang. Now, yin and yang was considered to be a quaint philosophical theory for most of human history. And it no longer is, because modern science, with all of its ability to see things that are ever so small, has found out that those things that are ever so small on the quantum level operate on the basis of yin and yang. Any experiment they do, they find out that is the case. Now, how the Taoists came up with this a few thousand years ago is anybody's guess. But their story is that Taoism did not originate on this earth. It came to the earth. Just like we have all this jazz now about humans came from the aliens who genetically coded us. But it came from off of this planet, because I said it's a big universe. And every one or combination of those planets had its own ways of looking at societies and the way they were going to treat them. So now they came to yin and yang. So, okay. If you really, if we take, let's just say the yin, the negative, and every yin is matched with a yang. So you can never say anything is pure yin or anything is pure yang. You can't. They're just more on one side of the ledger, one side of the room as opposed to the other. But if we look at all the yin and yangs, okay, let's say you got a heavy thing with yang. Hey, destroying things, dominating, you get off on that. It's not that you get off on it. That energy inside you gets off on it, and that energy inside you permeates your unconscious mind, and your unconscious mind tells you what to do, not your conscious mind. You know, that's the whole thing. Everybody is a sinner. Everyone doesn't want to be a sinner, but they keep on becoming a sinner because, yeah, their conscious mind says, I don't want to sin. I don't want to kill. I don't want to cheat. I don't want to lie. I don't want to exploit. And they truly in their conscious mind believe that. The only trouble is their unconscious mind says, well, that's all very nice, but you're actually going to do what we tell you to do. And guess what? The unconscious mind always wins, because it has the ability to change and to morph and to control the conscious mind. So the Taoist said, okay, so you've got the yin. I want to kill. I want to cheat. I want to do the things that are why the human condition may cease at some point. And then you have the other side of the coin, yang. What wants to make things expand, get greater, get more wonderful, that carries all the aspirations of human beings. And it gets stronger and stronger, and if that dominates in you, well, then you're considered to be super positive, super charming, super, they really believe everything that I think, because that's what that energy puts out. That's where human progress usually comes from, what we call progress. Just having, shall we say, better material goods. But still, it has its limits, because when yang goes too far, it'll start acting like yin. It'll create giant armies that will cause immense destruction. So understanding that, as long as yin and yang keep morphing, you're going to end up with all the results of all that morphing. And so the Taoist said, there has to be a way to neutralize all of this yin-yang ping-pong game from one to the other, from one to the other, because there is always yang inside of yin, there is always yin inside of yang, which means as long as you have that, it's like having a dog chasing its tail. Every time it runs around the circle, it may reverse directions, but still going to chase after its tail. So, they came up with all sorts of practice, and they said, well, how are you going to get rid of this bullshit? Now, they didn't use words like bullshit. They actually had stronger words than that. And they weren't that concerned with any sort of political correctness. Now, one of the things I said, the Chinese government and how it ran everything, and all the magistrates, came out of their great philosophical traditions. There were periods of time when Lao Tzu held sway, when Zhuangzi held sway, when Mengzi held sway, when the legalists held sway, were various of the major philosophies in China, because then the emperor made that the basis of ruling the imperial court. And the imperial court told all the Chinese military and soldiers and politicians what to do. Always with sanctions. There was never just they were depending upon people's good nature. You know, if you didn't do what the rules said, then they tortured you and your family to death. Nowadays, we have what are the current political correctnesses. That's how the Confucians dealt with it. They killed you if you didn't do it. No, now they'll make you broke. They'll cause your family to get impoverished. They'll put your tribe under incredible economic pressure. It's the same stuff, just the tactics different, depending upon the period of time you're in. Now, everybody in America anyway, at least when I was growing up, maybe it's changed, but I haven't seen any evidence of that. The big thing is get rich and everything will be fine. And that idea held sway for a century and a half. But now we're beginning to realize that just becoming rich isn't necessarily going to make you happy. It isn't necessarily going to make you satisfied with being on the earth. And we're seeing this with oligarchs who got, more money and know what to do with you. They're miserable fucks. That's the best way of putting it. Or they have periods of where their incredible wealth makes them feel, like Superman, and then all of a sudden crash down. They go into an equal period of depression. So now, this yin and yang thing, it is at the source of everything that manifests. Everything that comes into existence, the Chinese philosophy held, the DaodeJing held, came from yin and yang. So now the question is, how do you neutralize the poisonous aspect of it, the nasty aspect of it? Well, what the Taoists said is that they also were great fans of compassion. I mean, it's hard to knock love. It really is. The fact of the matter is that no matter how miserable you are, love will make you feel a lot better. But to do something that will nullify the negativity, the Taoists did not go for the idea of love. They went for the idea of balance. Now, love can cure, or love can reduce the viciousness of the human spirit. But so can balance. And the ancient Taoists believed that most human beings were not that capable of love. Now, I'm not against love. Some of you here, as a general rule in today's modern and political environment, the evangelicals who are the big love merchants, until you see what they do. And then they're not. And they yell love from every rooftop. But yet what they do is not very loving a lot of the time. And the most repeated phrase in the Dao De Jing, I should say in the I Ching, is there's nothing that does not further. The only two things that always further something, make it better, are balance. And the only way you can truly have balance is that it has to have some of it be about love. As a matter of fact, even have almost all of it be about love. But even that love has to be balanced. Because how many times do you find people being incredibly cruel to each other? I love you. I want to make you better. And then they fuck them over first time, first way, big time, big way. But they did use the word love, and they might have actually felt love. Because when they first did, they never had any desire to control or harm the other person. But let that love get a little bit weaker, and they start doing it. I have no idea why. It just seems to be what humans do. So the Taoists said the first thing they went for was balanced. And this was the basic thing they came in to create, that balance. Yin, yang. When they collapse into what the Chinese call Tai Chi, yin and yang are completely balanced with each other. And if you're able to if you want to make love bigger, it will naturally begin to reduce the horror side of it. So they looked at compassion. Compassion will further anything. If you truly, no matter how ticked off you are, or no matter how great your sense of revenge is, you enter enough compassion into that, enough love into that, enough balance into that, you'll find your way out of it. So we have these. So the trick is that you have to neutralize the power of yin to dominate yang and yang to dominate yin. Now for that, we now come down to one of the basic meditation techniques that all the rest of them are going to build on. And they call it dissolving. Now, the term is dissolving. Sankai. I'm not going to use Chinese. I can do this whole thing in Chinese, or any part of it you want in Chinese, just ask. Okay? But I don't think that's going to be terribly useful. I don't think it'd be that useful to start speaking in Lithuanian. Because you don't know Lithuanian, you don't know Chinese. And I only got to learn Chinese through 11 years of grief. Okay? So it's not an easy language to work out. And I had good tutors. So now if we start looking at it, what is something inside you that really rags you out? Was it something your parents did to you? Was it something that happened to you on the job? Was it something that happened to you in the military? Was it something that happened to you in school? But what is something that sticks in that you never can really quite get past, even though you know it's hogwash? So you put your attention on that. And the way they did it is they start at the top of the head. I'm not going to teach you the basic technique of inner dissolving. We don't have time for that. I do that in many other courses. Because everything's built upon it at the end of the day. You start from the top of your head and you just start letting your mind go down until something stops it. Now, the only reason why your mind can't travel through your body freely is because it's blocked. And what is the source of the blockage? Is it physical? Is it mental? Is it emotional? Is it psychic? Is it karmic? But something is that missing $450,000 that you can't, because you can't buy the house. Remember, because the inside of you is not like the modern economic system where you can leverage credit. No, it's just what's inside of you is all you got. Other people can inspire you, but only you can truly change what's inside you. And by inspiring you, they will just get you to say, wow, I got to do something about this. And then if you have a method, you got to go do it. Okay, so that is also one of the great saviors of Christianity. Is that it said, you don't have to do the work, just believe in Jesus. I'm not against believing in Jesus. Why not? But they also said that what is inside of you, what's outside of you is irrelevant. It doesn't matter. Now, throughout history in the Chinese, you can take it, Confucians, part of what they did is they always wore these robes and these things that when you looked at it, you went, whoa, that must be like some sort of a super somebody. Because they project that. We have that now. People have, women wear dresses that look like they should cost millions. Men wear suits that look like they should cost at least $1,000. And as soon as we see that, we say, oh, well, they must really know what they're doing. Look at many of the really top people in the ministers in the Christian church, the Protestant ministers, always wearing the suit, everything impeccably pressed and everything. Because now looking at that, they want you to identify with them as in some way being a representative of God. Because God's perfect like that. Now if you go back in history, the Taoists said that stuff is meaningless. They'd walk around with rags. They'd walk around whatever clothes they had, but they didn't make any particular effort, except when they did giant ceremonies, when they were trying to impress people like everyone else did. But they didn't do it as a normal event. They just said what's going to happen is that the stuff that's on the outside of you, that is what you're going to start operating from. Oh, sure. Having things on the outside of you, having a giant, multi-million-dollar house will impress other people. But if you think that's impressing your soul, you're out of your mind. You can impress your unconscious mind because that's what it wants. So these are things where they didn't really care about what people looked like. They cared about what they actually were. And the goals of their spiritual tradition were to get people back to what they actually were. And in that process, when you finally arrived at that, all these things that were hanging you up went behind. So you might do things all the time, like there are people in Daoism who say Zhuangzi. He deliberately used to try and rile people by deliberately going against what they thought all this external stuff was. He did it deliberately. There was no accident about it. And I believe that's nowadays where you have a rebellious teenager. Well, what do you think of that person? That's what happens. Not much. But what do most people think of that person? Oh, great one. Oh, great one. And I said, all those things will not clean your soul. They will not get rid of your blockages. So, right now, start going down and start thinking about what is something that really, really rags you out, makes you feel bad, makes you feel sad, makes you feel miserable, makes you feel worthless, makes you feel that you're not being justly treated. Why should an oligarch have billions and I've barely got enough money to buy dinner? It's a yin and a yang. And now just focus on it and find something inside you that is that. Now understand, when you meditate on a regular basis, these things are going to keep on popping up because unless you're enlightened, they're inside of you. And if they're inside of you, they are going to manifest if you just pay attention to them. So now do this. Now, in another one of these where the process of dissolving is shown in the DaodeJing, in those chapters I'll teach you how to dissolve. But for right now, just let your mind sit on this thing that's bothering you like a chicken sits on an egg so it can hatch. Now, if you do this, your mind is slowly going to start penetrating inside this. I don't say how deep or how much, but to some degree. And you would do this whether you had to do it for minutes, hours, days, weeks, or months, until you could recognize what this thing was inside you, how it made you feel, what you thought it was. And then the next step is after you've done that, because until you've done that, you can't do the next step. Then you just put your mind and you put your attention on whatever this thing is inside you. And just try and encompass it with as much of your being as you can. And next, you just have to accept that it's there. If most of us have something that makes us angry or makes us sad, we have to express it. We have to somehow shoot it out into the world. No, how about you just, I have a hand. I don't have to do much with the hand. Just be aware of the fact I have a hand and the hand is there and that's what the hand is. And the beginning phases of Taoist meditation in many ways are the hardest because they run counter to what human beings normally do. What they do is a habit. So you put your mind on it. until it becomes something you can recognize without effort. I don't have to go, oh, I have a hand. Just once I have my hand established in my mind, if I have it out there, I'm not going to forget it. Some part of my mind is always going to be on that hand. So this is how bad things happen to you, quote unquote bad. Of course, the Taoists have always recognized in the flow of time, what begins as good ends up as bad, what begins as bad ends up as good, and then it goes back to good again. They just will keep on changing. I'm broke, I'm rich, I'm rich, I'm broke. They'll just keep on moving from one to the other. It's just a question of how long it's going to take. And that depends upon how much attention you can put on it. Remember, it's your intention, it's your awareness that is the only medium through which you can contact what is deep inside you. So now we go to the other side. What is the opposite of that which makes you feel bad, sad, miserable, fucked up, whatever term you want to use? It's what makes you happy, joyful. It's Christmas, 365 days a year. It's that which is possible is what your mind notices, pays attention to. And then get your mind to settle on that. Now, those things which are good, they have many layers, just like those things which are bad have many layers. So you just keep on putting your mind in there, and you keep on trying to find those layers, and as you find the layer, you try and dissolve it. Later on, this will become clear when ice to water, water to inner spaces. But you put your mind on it, and until it can stay on it. Just like if you put your hand out there, you don't have to do much to stay on your attention to be on your hand. But it should be that easy. But it won't be that way in the beginning, because in the beginning what it's going to be like is, now you see it, now you don't, now you see it, now you don't. And penetrate that till you get to as deep as you can. And then when you have that, and again, you could be doing this for days. I can't say how long it will take for you to penetrate into your own mind and body. You have awareness. That is the one thing awareness does. It enables you to become aware of things, whether they're easy or difficult. Then bring the two of them together into a place in the middle and let them interpenetrate each other. And this will include the whole process of good turning to bad, bad turning to good, the constant wave-like motion between them until finally they stop. And you arrive at something where the two have combined. And in that combining, you find that both the yin and the yang are there. Neither one is making the other one better, nor is either one blocking the other. And you just keep on dissolving that until it becomes empty. Becomes empty of any content at all. And this is how you would resolve this. And it can be done when you're having something. And in the beginning, it takes a long time to get the strength, the power to do that. The DaodeJing in English is sometimes translated the way in its power. Well, this is one of its main powers. But it's like that power is locked inside a room and you just got to work the key on the door to open it up. But once you're inside, you're inside. But as you keep on doing this with lots of things, many things in life which would just cause you to flip out, make you feel terrible, or make you feel overly good, like having laughing gas put in your nose, that they'll become fairly even. And you'll still get feelings of something is better, something is worse. But they won't dominate and control you, because what you're going for right now, what this is doing, is going directly to your unconscious mind. Now, your conscious mind can come up with 1,000 reasons and 1,000 whys and wherefores, but that's not actually what makes you really act. It's like logically you work out, and it's like you want to go forward towards something, but then there's this thing that always holds you back, so you actually don't go forward. You're standing still in the same place. But if you can release your unconscious mind, you can start moving forward. And then your unconscious and your conscious mind can join together. And that's where you start living your life from a different place. Well, there's many more things in chapter 1 we'll see. Maybe we'll do some other ones the next time. But I think this is a good place to start, because unless you understand this, the rest of the Dao De Jing won't make sense to you. Remember, a lot of this stuff was written, it was written in the Chinese of like 2,500 years ago. And if you don't think Chinese culture is different than Western culture, then all I have to say is you're not educated. Okay, with that being said, I'll just take questions, if any of you have one, for 5 minutes. And then that'll be it for today.
And so just to remind everyone too that, and Bruce, we're going to have some books signed after this. So think about it if you have a question. And while you're thinking, if you want to have a book signed, the next step when we're finished is to purchase it downstairs and come right on back up to have it signed, so that we can get that taken care of efficiently. Sorry to get into logistics there, but and then if there are any questions.
Let me just say one more thing. Yin and Yang is part of everything that happens in Daoism. For example, if a hand goes forward, a hand goes back. If one goes up, one goes down. Now, that's physical movements. But the major problem people have when you talk about spirituality is not really what happens in their body, it's what happens in their mind. Now, they may have to sort out their body to get to their mind, and that's very common. But still, this is an introduction, and get the book, read it. Now, if you actually would like to really know something about Daoism, I'll tell you how you do it. You read the book 3 times, from beginning to end, which I realize in this world is almost like, the labors of Hercules. But in the first one, you just take it in, and all these questions are going to rise in your mind. Just let them be there. Some of them will make sense later on as you go through the DaodeJing, and some of them won't. And then the next time, focus more on the things that don't make sense. And in the third time, try and get what the whole message of the DaodeJing is. Forgetting about the 3 parts. What are you trying to do? How do you get it done? And what do you do when you got it? Because then your mind in each of these stages will have a tendency to open up. Now, the Dao De Jing was never meant to be the beginning, middle, and end of the spiritual process. Okay? There's a big difference between reading a physics book about how to create an atomic bomb, and then, okay, I'll give you the parts and I'll go make one. But they give you a very basic idea of where you're going. And that no matter how far you get in, no matter how far you get in your practices, when you read the Dao De Jing, it'll open up other things you need to consider. That until other parts of you open up, those ideas will never come into your head. They simply won't. And then the Dao De Jing was usually done, either Dao De Jing or Zhuangzi, or both, was usually something that within Daoism a person had to have a good understanding of before they would even attempt the I Ching. Because the I Ching is now getting into the nitty-gritty of how things, let's just say it's more down to the quantum level. Okay? So, if you have any questions, I'll take them for 5 minutes. Otherwise, give me books and I'll sign them.
Okay. Great. So we're going to, Johnny, if you want to come up and help, we're going to set a table up on the stage. So please grab your books and come on up to have them signed. Thank you so much, Bruce.